Welcome to Success Fundamentals, hosted by myself, Chris Sykes, and my co-host, Brian Gosak. We are on a mission to seek out some of the most successful people in our network that have been able to define what success means to them so you can draw the map of your own path and take your first steps. We hope you enjoyed today's episode to get one step closer to your success goals. Starting a business is exciting. And one of the fundamentals of starting a business is making sure you have the proper legal structure. But legal structure only takes you so far. You want to make sure that your personal assets are protected, and that's where Corporate Direct comes in.
Getting started is easy. First, you tell them about your business or investment. Second, they do a business name check. Third, they file the paperwork. And fourth, you receive the documents and you're official. To get $100 off your business setup, go to SuccessFundamentals.com, click on the Corporate Direct link. When the information form asks, where did you hear about us? Type in Success Fundamentals and they will take it from there.
Corporate Direct, asset protection done right. Now, back to the show. Successors, welcome back to another edition of Success Fundamentals. I am your co-host, Chris Sykes. Brian is trying to jump on. He's having some connection issues, but I think he should be in shortly. Today, we have a legendary show. We have one of the top people at Oracle, and I'm pretty sure everyone listening knows who that is, but let me kind of give you a rundown of who we are talking to today. So he is currently the Senior Vice President and the Chief Information Security Officer for Oracle. Before that, he was a public cloud security engineering director for Google. And before that, he spent 18 years at Microsoft. But he also served this country by being in the U.S. Navy. David Cross, welcome to our show, sir.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity. One thing I will clarify a little bit, though, is I am a Senior Vice President at Oracle, and I'm a CISO for the SaaS environment, because Oracle is a very large company, so I never want anyone to be confused by that.
100%. Thank you so much for clearing that up. So, David, again, thank you for serving. I think that we had this conversation before. My sister serves in the Navy currently, so anything the armed forces do, I support wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
So, David, before we dive into, because I have so many questions, because not only you currently working at Oracle, you were also in the venture capital space as well, and I have a ton of questions about that. But before we get into your illustrious career, take us back to where you're from and where it all started.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, I think, is that, if I think back of anything that I can really thank of how I got to where I am today, I'd actually, honestly want to thank the U.S. military and the government. And a lot of people say, well, why is that? Well, myself and my family I wouldn't say we were that well off when I was growing up. And I was pretty proud that I was accepted to some major universities, and I probably shouldn't name them because I didn't go to them. But the reality was, I felt honored and I'm proud that I was accepted, right? But there's no way I could afford to attend or live at one, even if I could afford the tuition, right? We didn't have enough money for me to live at one. So what I had to do is I kind of had to go to a tier 2 school, right? And where I was able to start and spend a couple of years, but I just couldn't finish, right? I just didn't have the finances and the means to really continue and survive. I was working full time. It just wasn't enough. So I really I never give up. I always love challenges. And so what I saw is that, well, maybe the military is a way for me to kind of survive where I was at and kind of grow and finish my degree and look for future opportunities. And I think that was pretty exciting because it really helped me to build kind of an experience base to eventually leap into the IT sector and high tech community, which I'm a part of today. So that, if I look, 25 years later, it's been almost exactly 25 years, right? I've been able to climb the ranks in the high tech sector in many respected companies like Microsoft, Google, Oracle. And, I'm really kind of proud to say, and it's kind of very coincidental with this podcast, is that this weekend I'm going to be recognized as the first distinguished alumni of the engineering school of my school, Chapman University. And I'm actually flying down to California, despite the pandemic. I, say that, is it really safe to travel right now? But I said, this is something that is once in a lifetime. I can't pass it up. And so that's something I'm very, very proud of, 25 years later after all that work and getting my degree. And I'm also, really, proud to say that, from a veteran perspective, right, I am the executive sponsor of the MAVEN, which is the military affiliated, veteran program and employee resource group at Oracle. And I can't ask for much more than to where I started and where I'm at today, and have an opportunity to influence and help others at a company like Oracle.
That's amazing. Hats off to you for that, David. That's a huge accomplishment, I'm sure. For sure. So, when you decided to go into the Navy, what did you always have an interest in going into the Navy, or what pulled you in that direction? Well,
long story short is that, my father had served in the Navy, I think back in the Vietnam War days, things like that. And it said maybe there was some attraction there. But actually, when I was started in college, I was initially interested in nuclear physics, right, and chemical engineering. And so, boy, the Navy makes sense. I can go into the nuke program. Well, that was my plan. It started out great, but as I started into the program, kind of long story short, is it turns out, well, I couldn't get my initial clearance at that program because my brother was maybe doing some less savory things in the world, and they really weren't good with that. And so I needed to adopt and change. So I'm already in the military, but I can't continue in that program. So I went into aviation. And so I continued with that because you never give up. And I think it's one of the things in life, whether it's about money, life, and career, is that you never give up. You face an obstacle, you find a way around, and you move forward.
That's fantastic. So climbing, doing well in the, how long were you in the Navy, David?
5 years active duty, and then actually a few years later, I served 3 years in the Army Reserve in the National Guard.
Okay, and would you say climbing the ranks, like having the discipline? What was the hardest thing being in the Navy and the Army Reserve? Like, did you already have the discipline going into it, or did you have to work at that?
Well, I think that's actually, it's kind of interesting, is that I was always pretty dedicated, whether I was working at a restaurant or a janitor or McDonald's, right? I was always want to, how can I be the best, right? How can I be the best at everything I do? And that really, continues in the military. And I think the military always provides an opportunity for everyone to continue to grow. And I remember myself when I was in aviation and things like that, saying, well, these are the qualifications you're supposed to have. And then I said, well, I'm bored. And what can I do to get other qualifications? And that's what I did. I said, well, no one's done that before. And I said, where does it say in NATOPS, the Naval, Aviation, program in rules? And I said, well, there's no restrictions. I said, great, I'm going to get qualified. And eventually, after my first deployment, my commanding officer gave me a Navy Achievement Medal, for recognizing for that because of my persistence.
That's fantastic.
So that was always a part of you. It was always a part of you that
yes.
The desire to be, how would you describe it? Just a perfectionist, or put it in your own words?
Put in my own words. I think I always want to be successful in my own way, right? It's not about being better than anyone else. It's just more of like, okay, this is what it means to be successful for that particular role or that particular position or particular company. Then I just want to make sure I do it. And I think it's kind of what drives me is I think it's, for me, my brain is always working. It's kind of like I'm a runner. I'm not a professional runner. But it's like I don't listen to music when I run. I listen to podcasts or books on audibles because otherwise I get bored. And that's my life. Is even to this day, you can say, do I need any more education? No, but if I don't do some Coursera courses on the side, I get bored.
So I have a follow-up question on that same note. So for, let's say, entrepreneurs out there, people where, let's say, the path isn't as laid out as perhaps the military might be, where you can go through a very clearly defined ranks and tasks. When you're breaking into a new venture, like even like technology, I'm sure when you started was like this whole new world, and there wasn't a clearly laid out path how to exceed. What did you use as that measuring stick to know if you were doing well so you can keep kind of pushing forward?
I think there's two ways. One is that how you find a mentor or someone that inspires you. And the second way is really surrounding yourself with others, right? And I think if you look at other entrepreneurs and other successful people, it's usually one or either, or sometimes both, right? And I think that's one of the things that I've learned as well from the military. Let's talk about diversity for a second, right? Is I think that, both organizations and businesses are successful because of inclusion and diversity, right? And I have to admit, I learned this, from the very first day of boot camp when I was in the Navy, right? And because, you learn and see that it's the combination of not just, ethnics or ethnicity or demographics, but it's about different thinking and experiences. And that's really about how everyone can be successful. And that's one thing that is very, very important to me.
Where do you think that came from for you, David? Because I'm pretty sure, was there an example? Did you think that stemmed from your upbringing? Because, for example, with me personally, I'm trying to be the best that I can be in this and in my professional job because of what I went through as a child. So I don't want to have to repeat that lifestyle. So I'm trying to do everything that I can to be successful in what I do to attain or to achieve what I want to achieve in this life. So for you, was it your parents? Was it your grandparents? Was it somebody you looked up to that, that kind of had that ambition? Because that ambition isn't in everybody. Even when people who come from modest means, that is not in everyone at all.
I think that some people, I guess if you knew me, people say that, oh, David, yes, I can tell you grew up in the Motor City, right? I was born and raised in Detroit. And yes, I love cars. And that will always stick with me to this day. But I think it's like, I look at my father, who was a Detroit police officer, right? And when I was young, that he broke his back, carrying a stretcher for someone and slipped on the ice and broke 2 discs. And this is the time, right? There was no surgery and things like that. But then I see my father did he ever give up? Did he ever stop? No. He just persevered. And I think kind of subconsciously, I think that stuck with me for the rest of my life.
So you saw an example of it being, that regardless of what happened, it was always, you got to get up and can continue to move forward regardless of what happens to you.
Absolutely.
So I'm saying I'm doing it like this because I want to tie it into a lesson for our listeners, right? So what would you tell someone who maybe needs that push? Maybe in their life, they don't have an immediate example to show, that, whatever you want to achieve, or not even achieve. If you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability, give it your all. If someone doesn't have that immediate mentor or that immediate example, what ways can people kind of look to kind of get that so they can start forming the habit of doing well at whatever they do?
That's a good question. I think as some ways I think about anything in life, you identify what you desire. And I don't want to get in trouble there, but what do you want to achieve? What do you desire, right? And from there is you kind of, you're building out being a detective. You find and build out the path. And this is the way I think about it, is that, I'd love to be like that person. I'd love to achieve what they have achieved. I'd love to have that role. And so you find, well, how did someone get there? Who is there? Where, can I talk to them? Can I reach out to them? Can I find out something? And never give up. You become a detective. Maybe that's the way I think about it. I think about, there's a case where I could say, many different stories that where I think of one that when I was inside of Microsoft, and I know that, hey, they're going to hire a general manager to work overseas in Israel. And I said, wow, I'd love to have that opportunity someday. I know I'm not qualified, right, to be a general manager, but I reached out to the vice president and saying, hey, someday I'd love an opportunity like that. What would it take to get there? What do I need to do the next 5 years? And reaching out. And amazing that how many people will give you some answers and help you, if you are the detective, to go find these things out.
Okay. So Brian, so this leads into like the big question, and then we can definitely go into that. So by you saying that, David, so the show is called Success Fundamentals. Brian and I wanted to create a platform where we're talking about the fundamentals of what it takes, regardless of what you do, whether you're in comedy, whether you're in business, whatever you do, there's some fundamental traits that you need to start to form today, or you can start today in order to become that success you want to be, however you define that, right? So from your experience on everything that okay, for example, if I wanted to build a house and you say, okay, Chris, here's a book to build the house, and the very first page is you need a solid foundation. I don't care how nice you think your house is going to be. If you don't have a foundation, it's going to fall, right? But if I bypass the foundation part and start trying to pick out like the nicest stone and the chimneys and things, doesn't matter how nice the house is, I don't have a solid foundation, so the house will never last. So from your perspective, David, and everything that you've achieved, fundamentally, what would you say people need to start forming now as a trait or as a habit to become successful?
I'm going to go back to my military experience and something that I believe in. It's about having the right values and principles in place. That needs to be your foundation. If you don't know what your values and principles are, then you have no starting point. You have no dry land to stand upon, right? And I think from there, that's something you always have to start with, because otherwise you don't know if the path you're headed or the approach you're going to take or where you want to go is going to end up in the right place.
So to dig deeper into that, is it to find your own values and principles, or do you believe that there are certain values and principles that one should possess?
Well, I think it'd be, I can't dismiss that. I think there's some values and principles that everyone should have, but we know that's not true in life, right? But the thing is, at the same time, people can adopt and embrace, right, and learn new values and principles. But at the same time, I think that's the most important point, is that you have to know what your values are and principles that you are adopting and embracing to be your foundation starting point. Because we can name different companies and different roles that some people would never fit with, but don't go there if they're in conflict with who you are and who is your identity and your values.
So success to me, success, goodness gracious, I can't talk. Success to me is both sides too, right? Because you can do things fundamentally over time to become that, but then also too, you can be your own worst enemy as well, right? So I'm pretty sure, David, throughout your career, you've seen people who maybe had the potential, or you were like, goodness gracious, like if they just did X, they could change their life. So what would you say on the flip side of that coin people do to kind of sabotage their own journey, in terms of what they're trying to accomplish as well?
Certainly I think that no one is perfect in life. And part of it is that the most successful people are the ones, that even though the gaps you may have, the development you may need, or the challenges you're encountering, right? It's where you seek out the mentors, both, kind of say not just above you, but your peer mentors. And how you seek out mentoring is really to help you through all those challenges. That's like surrounding yourself with others, but also sometimes it's all about the peer mentoring is the one the way that you can actually get through these challenges and helping yourself through all those obstacles and pits.
So this actually ties into the question that I was going to ask earlier. So you are in an industry, and in a variety of different industries in the past, that really are on the cutting edge of not just the economy, not just of technology, but like the economy at large. Like the U.S. is the technological powerhouse, and there's people inventing new things and better ways to do things constantly. And you're at the top of that industry. So I hear you when you say that mentorship is important, but I'm also wondering to myself, when you're at the top of an industry that is so new, is it difficult to find mentors since you're at the top of a new thing?
That's a good question.
That is a great question, actually. I think is that just like for those of you that read the Wall Street Journal, right, they always see some great figures and people like that they have mentors as well, right? Even like they're top of their game, they always have advisors or mentors. And I think part of it is that it's not just about the person. If you're at the top, it's not that you need someone above you. It's really about, you have to ask your question, what is it that you need? Because that need and your challenges may differ and change over time, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you may need some technical guidance. So you may need some communication, feedback. You may need someone that knows how to create a presence or positioning. We all have different needs at different times. Instead of finding the mentor and counsel for yourself based on your growth and your path at that time.
Wow. So it's not just necessarily, I want to reiterate that point. So it's not just finding somebody that has excelled in that specific career that you're in, but it could even be a mentor that is excelling in a particular thing that you are working on personally, professionally. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the same career. Am I hearing you correctly?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And that even though you sometimes the mentor be someone you're rising far above, yet they have the perspectives and skills or experience that you need to be successful. And it's about being humble.
So Success, I really want you to hear what he just said. So it's not necessarily like Brian said, it seems like you're like, as a mentor, it's almost seeking out skill sets. So regardless if they're above or below you, you're seeking out a certain skill set. So it may not be the person is very well versed in cybersecurity. They may know how to manage people very, very well. So if that person is below or the same level as you, they can be a mentor for that particular skill set to kind of move forward. That's actually a really good way of defining a mentor, David. I've never heard that spoken like that ever, actually.
Yeah, they would be like you're the CEO of a tech company, but you go to like the best car salesman in the United States to learn sales. You probably make a lot more than that car salesman, presumably. But that car salesman or saleswoman might know how to sell like you have never seen before. And to get that skill set and your repertoire of skills and your utility belt is well worth it. Well worth it. Very interesting, David. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can say that, I tell one little story is that, and I've shared with so many mentees over the many, many years. My first manager at Microsoft, this is, 20, some years ago. I was out of the military for 2 years. I joined Microsoft, and he sat me down and said, David, I'm going to teach you 3 things of what it means to be successful in your career. And so the first one, he said, no matter what company you're at, no matter, what performance ladder, career goals, leveling, those type of things. He said, in the end, to be successful is as simple as this. They have a list of people in everyone's mind who makes things happen and who doesn't. So in the end, you want to get promoted, you want to be successful, you want to be recognized, just make things happen. The second thing he said, it sticks to me this day. He said, when you're at a company, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Oracle, name any company, it says you need to be the owner of whatever project, process, technology, feature, information, whatever it is. You want to be the owner. You want to be the expert. And saying, well, who owns that? Oh, that's David Cross. Who's the expert on that? Oh, that's David Cross. Who do I talk to about X? That's David Cross. The third one is said, which is the hardest for most people. He said, really about moving up the ladder, you can brute force, so many things. Kind of the famous book author is, I think it was Ram said, what got you here won't, get you there. I know I got the wrong title, but in the end, he said, the hardest thing for most people is the most valuable people are those who make other people successful. And you really look at it in any company and roles, it's like you make other people successful, and how you do that using your experience, your knowledge, your tools, and helping them is then that's how you become very, very valuable. And that's how people grow into leadership positions over time.
Make things happen. Be the owner. Make other people successful.
So listeners, you are getting nothing but straight jewels right now from somebody who has actually done it. So this is pretty much what we're trying to do. So David, okay. Because I have a lot of questions about 2 things, cybersecurity and your venture capital background. But before we dive into that, so I interviewed someone a couple of weeks ago, and she said one of the success fundamentals is you have to do the work. Now, because not always you're going to be doing the work that you want to do. And there's always lessons in everything you do, right? So for someone, let's just say someone does work at Oracle, someone does work at Google or whatever the case may be, and they want to do something else. How detrimental is it to them if they have a poor attitude in terms of, yeah, I work at Oracle, but I want to be in this department, but I got on as, whatever role, and they're terrible at that role, because those three things are key. And I think that people think that they have to be doing what they want to do to apply 1, 2, and 3 in order to rise the ranks, to rise the ranks. But a lot of people have bad attitudes of where they are now, but they have the expectation of doing something else. So could you speak to that?
Sure. I guess this comes back to, I think, what I mentioned earlier about you're always going to have challenges, you always have obstacles, but you never give up. When I left, the military, it's like, wow, I'm doing programming, I'm doing a side job, everything that, hey, I want to get into Microsoft. And they're like, no, your experience is not, current enough. You don't have enough examples. And so, no, come back. So I went back, I started graduate school. I got some great opportunities working, some consulting positions, trying to build up my skill set. And 2 years later, I came back to Microsoft. And so that you never give up, right? Even though it's what you want and what you think you believe in, or what you want to be in, is you go find, you take the feedback, you swallow it, and you accept it, and then you go and build upon that, right? It's like being the detective. It's another fundamental in itself, as many companies, like, be self-critical. And guess what? Sometimes that feedback's going to sting, but you know exactly what you need to do to get into it. I can say again, even at Microsoft, the job I got, my first job at Microsoft, was Microsoft Consulting Services. I didn't want to be a consultant. I wanted to be in a product group. But I had to get my foot in the door. Did I give up? No. When I joined, I had a 6-figure salary before I joined Microsoft. It got cut in half. But guess what? I wanted in Microsoft. So I want to get my foot in the door. I don't give up. But I want to get in product groups. So what did I do? Well, Microsoft Consulting Services. And ultimately, they said, I was there a minimum of 1 year, right? You got to be 1 year. It's like, all right, I want to go to the product group. Like, no, David, program managers, they write white papers, they speak at RSA, speak at conferences. You've got no examples of that. Okay, so what I do in year 2 at Microsoft and Microsoft Consulting Services? Oh, on my own time, I wrote 5 white papers on my own time, my own dime, right, and published them for Microsoft. I went and spoke at the RSA conference, and I spoke at Microsoft Tech Ed. And I was saying all the time, it's like I took vacation because I was Microsoft Consulting Services. I was on the books. So I took vacation so I go speak at these conferences to convince them I wanted in the product group. They're like, okay, Dave, we'll give you a chance, but your level, you're too high of a level, right? You're in consulting, you're doing great there. Like, I'll drop a level. Just let me in the product group, right? And they're like, okay, fine. I'll lower myself, get in again. But that's all I wanted, to get my foot in the door. And yep, it took me 3.5 years to get the level back. But so what? That's what I wanted to do. And ultimately, by the time I left, right, I was the head of program management for Windows security, right, by the end of it, by the time before I went to my new role.
So the detective side.
100%. But also, too, he just gave a great example of having don't let anything stand in your way. If that's what you want to do, you have to do the work where you are first, and you have to prove to people that you're willing to do X. Imagine how that looks. He's not where he wants to be in the company itself, but he spent his own money to create these white papers for a company, right? To prove to them that this is where he wants to be, right? So that's a lesson. Now, David, shifting into cybersecurity. Now, I am an extreme novice in this. Now, only thing I know about cybersecurity is what you see on TV. But right now, it seems like every other headline is a huge company. Data's getting, stolen and things of that nature. So by you being in the thick of that world, walk us through one, the importance of cybersecurity, and two, why people need to really, really take it serious, and how to combat it.
Well, it's a challenge. It's certainly, I say that I've been cybersecurity and security for, most of my career. I've done some things on the side, right? But I come back to a little story that it all started when I was in the Navy, right? So even though we didn't really have worries of cybersecurity back then, but, the end of my second deployment coming back to the United States, and this is in 1995, 96. And what I did is I bought a book from the Naval Exchange bookstore in Naples, Italy, and it was called Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography. I still have that book to this day, right? And so when we're coming back, from the cruise from the Mediterranean back to Norfolk, Virginia, right, there's nothing to do. So I read this book of applied cryptography, right, because I had nothing to do, and I became fascinated and hooked on the potential opportunities in this area, right? And I was kind of pretty proud that just a couple years later, before I joined Microsoft, I actually met Bruce Schneier. It was either at the RSA conference or it was DEF CON in Las Vegas, right? Went to both. And it's really saying that, hey, this is where I got my career. But why did I do it? Because I saw that it is a vertical. It's a, an area that it needs discipline. It needs focus. It needs attention. And it's also so dynamic. And I think that's why some people hate it and some people love it, right? And I think cybersecurity is that it's not fundamentally different, right? Of course, there's mathematicians or cryptographers and things like that, but cybersecurity, it's really about fundamentals, right? Being diligent, being attention to detail, being focused, and always being on top of your game and learning. And I think this is where everyone has to be careful. And maybe analogy is that, well, it's like driving, right? You've got to be diligent. You got to be careful. You got to be aware of what's going on around you. And when now with computers and data and everything moving to the cloud, right? This is where the challenges are coming. So this is why I'm pretty excited to be at Oracle, and because as everyone's moving their data and applications to the cloud, they need people to help them, and that's part of our mission.
So, David, I have a question about that too, because maybe you can explain this to me, because cybersecurity and the people who like hack into these things and like the ransomware, right? And like I believe like a month or so ago, this hacking group hacked into like an oil pipeline and demanded millions before releasing the pipeline, right? So how does that even happen? Like in turn, like a company that huge and that's supposed to have stitched up, security from a cyber standpoint, and the hack, because I know these hackers are very talented to do something like that to a company that large. But how does that even a possibility, right?
Well, I think that, similar to, I'll say, it sounds like a bad analogy, but saying like, wow, we now have this chip shortage, right? It's not just affecting computers and getting the latest computers and servers and things like that, latest laptops, but it's affecting cars, right? How many people know how many chips are in cars? Now, where am I going with this? Well, now you think about every business, that has a heater, that has a furnace, that has door systems, has cameras. Everything has chips in it. And light bulbs. How many actually have active light bulbs? Everything's connected to the internet. They say the Internet of Things. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're all facing in society, is that everything is now connected. Everything is using a chip. Everything has software. And that means everything needs to be protected. Everything needs to be monitored. Everything needs to be protected. And that does take work, right? And so it's just like you put more windows on the house, that means you got more windows to wash. But if you put more windows and you're not having any plans to washing them and protecting them, then it means they're going to get dirty and there can be negative results.
Does that start from the beginning? Like as they're getting produced? Like, okay, so again, this is me being a novice. So as these chips are being produced, what can be put into a chip to protect it from? I don't think anything cannot be hacked, but like can like give you the best edge of making it as difficult as possible for a hacker to hack into something, like from pre-production stage.
Yeah, this is where it gets complex, but I think there's an element. Is a lot of companies, like Oracle and others, right, are actually looking at, like in our cloud, is that in our chipsets that we're making sure that we have the provenance, right, of the chipset and the software that's on these chips that goes into the computer, so that they're not tampered. That the motherboards we're putting in the systems, right, they, name your favorite, conspiratorial movie, right, is that hey, the Russians or Chinese are putting a chip on the motherboard and no one knows about it, and so they could steal your data. That's the things that major companies like Oracle do to ensure that we have a complete, solid, validated stack, so that when applications and data are put upon them, they're not being attacked and misused by the criminals and the nation-state attackers.
Ooh, okay. So does that mean that every once in a while you'll be looking at perhaps a stack of hardware that comes over, and you actually go like, hey, what is that chip doing there? That's suspicious. And you look into it, and they were actually making an attempt to use that as a way in, and you have to tell them to stop?
No, part of it is it's about really having great supply chain and provenance of everything that's built, right? So that you actually can know that anything, if it ever was tampered with, right, that all the controls on it are very tightly controlled. It's kind of like you talk about money, right? It's saying that how do we know this transaction occurred, right? How do we have provenance on that a given person wanted a market made, and where did the money come from? It's very similar in software, and that's one way to think about it.
Mm.
So I have a question that's related to this, but kind of shifting gears a little bit. So in the advent of the Internet of Things and the fact that things are picking up speed in which, all these different things being connected, I think I could turn on the light bulbs at my house from my phone right now as a result of the Internet of Things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there... I'm trying to find the right words here. Is there a whole horizon of connectivity that we are capable of achieving, yet it would make us vulnerable if we went there, and therefore we need cybersecurity to catch up first? Or does it usually go in lockstep? I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, I think I know where you're going. And I think the honest answer on things is then, does anybody wait for anything, right? Are we going to put a hold on it? Can you say, hang on, I'm not going to use my smartphone because I'm not ready for it to protect my data, right? I'm not going to use that new light bulb until that I'm confident that it can be patched, in real time whenever there's a vulnerability. In society and humans, right? Do we wait for those things? No, we don't.
Great point.
No, 100%. So David, so I want to ask you two questions, and you can get as deep as you want to with this. The first is, how serious should people take cybersecurity, and what are some of the stories that you've seen where somebody or a company didn't take cybersecurity serious and it actually was detrimental to their business because they maybe had easy passwords, or they didn't use two-factor authentication, or what are some of the scary stuff that if you would want to share with our audience about cybersecurity? And then two, what can people do as a result of that, in terms of even though that we're not cybersecurity, professionals, or, at that verse in it, what are some simple things that we can do to protect some of our stuff that's like our personal computer, our phones, etc.?
Yep. I will say three things, and I think they're not going to be dissimilar, from many other pundits and other, companies as well. It's certainly, first and foremost, whether it's in the cloud or bank accounts, in the end, the number one attack and detriment for everything and all the scenarios you see, you've been phished. They stole your credentials. In the end, in every possible way that you can do it, multi-factor authentication. You have an online account, banking, Facebook, Twitter, social, everything you can have, your phone. If you don't have multi-factor, a secondary motion to get into these things, you're going to get hit someday. It doesn't matter who you are, how good you are at security, right? You need that secondary protection. You got to have backup. The second way I would say it's all about patching, right? You got a new phone, if your phone is 8 years old, smartphone, still working just fine, guess what? It's not being patched, right? You're going to be vulnerable. They're going to come after you someday. Even though you say we're not famous, we have nothing there, guess what? You're going to get caught. So your phone, your laptop, your machine, your computer, always staying up to date, everything. And the second one, I would say, is being aware, in learning, right? Is that always everybody should be taking training in learning and being aware of their surroundings on what the right thing to do, because it is dynamic. It does come over time, right? And I think that's probably the hardest challenge that everyone faces in every role, every persona, every company, every day of life. And I think that's where we're always going to encounter things.
Mm. And hold on, Brian, because I want to ask this question too. What does it mean when we see in the news that your data has been compromised? If somebody's like, hey, I see that you have a credit card at Home Depot, your data may have been compromised. What does that mean, and what can people who hack into a Home Depot or whatever the case may be, what can they do with that data?
I can't speak for other companies per se, but certainly, our specific incidents. But I can say that in many cases, which I've encountered myself personally, right, is that a lot of time where attackers are usually going after, number one is personal information or credit card, information, right? Because it's very simple. I would say it's all about the Benjamins, as we would say, right? Is the attackers, they want money, right? Ransomware, they want money. Breaking Home Depot, they want your credit cards. They want money. And ultimately, they're getting actually your data is so that they can actually very quickly pawn it off and sell it, right? So nowadays, it's not just like, hey, I'm going to go steal something from someone's house and get to the pawn shop. Now they're doing the same thing just virtually. I'm going to go steal these credit cards really fast and sell them off to someone that will buy them and get away with it as fast as I can. And that's what it's all about. And it's unfortunate. But because we're moving so many things into the cloud, right, into the technology, that's the nature of who we are now, the threats are different. And they can actually be done quite quickly because they're not physical anymore. They're virtual. And I think and part of it, though, I think is to an advantage, is that for many companies, whether in personas, is that trying to stay up to date, for on-premise, right? Say, hey, you're going to run the servers, you're going to run the machines all yourself in application, especially for your small businesses, right? Compared to, moving it to the cloud in applications where you can have the experts, where you cannot, right? Is how many people can have a cybersecurity expert if you're a small or medium-sized business to monitor and manage everything, in the dynamic nature. It's difficult to do. And this is where moving to the cloud is a major advantage for many, many companies and businesses that do that.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. So if you were trying to do all of your server controls on your own, you would need to actually hire somebody that was an expert in that. Whereas if you move it to the cloud with that service, there's just teams of people that are protecting your data for you, just simply through doing that. Wow, never really thought of it like that.
That's absolutely correct. So let's talk about money. Say, how many people actually get a stock certificate and store it themselves anymore? I think technically you could do it in some cases, but it doesn't make sense anymore, right? Yeah, certainly, having checkbooks. Yeah, people still use checkbooks to a degree, but compared to the advantage and protections that you have of doing bill paying in the cloud, it's a night and day difference, and that's what it's all about. And so businesses, it's then why to try to have the best possible expertise at a very high cost compared to somebody that does it for their business and has it 24/7 and provides that value proposition.
And then, I did have my question from before that I wanted to ask. We had another cybersecurity expert on our show months and months ago, worked for Sevco Security. And I asked him this question. He didn't know the answers. So maybe you can help me with this. So you said that these people, they get this data, and usually it's credit card information, and then they exchange it digitally to one another at a cost. Where are these people hanging out on the internet? How do they know where to hang out? I imagine that I said this on the episode, like that bar in Star Wars where all of the criminals hang out and you just walk in. So, number one, where is that alien bar on the internet? And how do they even find out about that alien bar where they can be selling these credit cards?
Yep. They're kind of called dark forums, right? So just like social media and other things, and pretty much you could set up anything on the internet. And part of it, I would say, is like being welcomed into the club, right? And this is what law enforcement and cybersecurity professionals do sometimes, is like how to get welcomed in the club. Just like terrorism, just like other criminal activities, is that sometimes you need to be undercover, sometimes you need to be invited in, and that's how you can find these and to root them out and bring them down. But that's basically what it is because the internet is you can set up anything anywhere, and they're called dark forums, and that's where that we see like Silk Road occurred and things like that. That's how they operate.
Actually, he said unlisted sites. Unlisted sites.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you for that.
So
when are we going to hit him with the two bombs?
I want to hit him with those, but I want to have I want to ask him a quick question about his venture capitalist days.
Oh,
sure. What were you a part of the investment team, David? Or like what was your role specifically in the investment world, in the venture capital space?
Well, it's kind of like it all starts, I would say, with being, an angel or seed investor, right? And myself, I pretty much prefer predominantly, to be in the cybersecurity interest, but it's all about connections. It's all about the network, right? And so sometimes I've had, I say one of the ones that I'm very proud of is the Twistlock acquisition by Palo Alto, but some former employees that used to work for me, when I was at Microsoft that formed a startup, and I had an opportunity to invest early, with them because I believed in them. I knew who they were. I knew what they stood for. I knew and felt their passion. And I think that most people that are successful, you think from a startup world, is really, it's all about the passion and commitment and, and dedication that a founder has is what makes them successful.
How do you know something is going to actually work? Like, so for you, you say you invest specifically in the cybersecurity space, and two of your colleagues go out and they start a company in that space, and then they pitch you, David, the idea. Are you saying, oh, that's a great idea that problem hasn't been solved yet? Or is it more so, oh, you found a better, more efficient way to do the current thing today?
I'll be honest, I read lots of books, and I think you probably do as well. You think of name your favorite investors, you think your favorite, entrepreneurs. In the end, I say it's all about Vegas, baby. It's like you put it on black or you put it on red on the roulette wheel. And that's the way you have to look at it, right? Is if there was a magic that everyone can tell, I don't think it is. It's luck. There's a lot of luck into it. And part of it, and I think the one thing that really what you're looking for is that is you believe in it. You're passionate about it. And because you're not just putting your money into it, you're actually putting your interests, sometimes your expertise, sometimes your advice, sometimes your passion is like, wow, guess who you're going to be tweeting about or liking, on your favorite social media. It's a company that you believe in. Right, not just because you put $50,000 into it.
Got it. So in venture capital, you're more so betting on the person and the idea and hoping that it pops. Because, like you said, like if they don't have any track record, it's kind of hard to kind of gauge that. But if like you said, if it's the person and the idea, you're hoping that the money you put on black takes off, right? Or it lands on black, right?
Absolutely. But also, doesn't that come back to the same thing that I mentioned before about principles and values, right? Is 100%. That person, do they have the values and principles that you believe in? If they don't, then what are you doing? Are you really fighting with yourself?
I like that. I like that. That's very true. Okay, Brian, it's time.
All right, here we go. So we asked two questions to every one of our guests that we leave intentionally vague in order to inspire thought. First question, David, what is your overall perception of money? Second question is, what role does power play in your vision of success?
Okay, so this should be fun. So I think of money. So I'll be honest, I don't think about investments as wealth as a measurement of my success, right? Is that the reality is we're human. And so I look at investments and wealth and money as, my journey to retire, right? And, I could say as a runner, right, I say retirement is like the goal of completing a marathon. It takes lots of planning. It takes training. It takes some discipline, right? A lot of commitment, right? And part of it is that you have to place bets, along the way on what should you be eating, right? Do you carb load, right? Or do you eat protein, right? What's your training techniques? How much time do you spend on each activity? What's your willpower, your diligence, right? And it takes a lot of diversity, training and commitments, right? To really hit this goal, right? Of completing a marathon, right? So I say, just like investing, right? You got to be educated. You have to have training, right? And often that you need a coach or a financial advisor, right? Is that you may be great at it, but we often need coaches because we're not perfect. We often need, the experience of others to ensure we're doing the right thing sometimes. And ultimately, I say that is, not just necessarily completing the marathon, is that great? You'd finish the marathon in 10 hours. Is that really great? You finish retirement. Yes, you have $50 in the bank. Can you retire now? No. And so that's why I say, your nest egg, right? And the size of your nest egg is kind of like your finish time in a marathon, right? And so that's what you need to kind of, retire the way you want to do, right? And ultimately is that to really achieve that, have a finish a marathon in a great time or have a nest egg, when you're ready to retire, right? It's going to take some risks, right? And if you don't take any risk, there'll be no return. That's we know that in life, we know that in marathons and running, we know that in investing.
Next, power, both are hard, but I think power is the tough one.
So power, I think is that, I guess for me, when I think about power, I think it's like, oh, that's politics. And I think for me, that's never excited me. That's never, meant anything to me, right? I think about of what do I want in life? And I think that maybe that is where power comes from, right? Ultimately, I think that I wanted to, for me, I think if I really think about it, sorry, I hesitate. It's like, I think about power is about my own success, and this is where I think about, it's about, I have my own, I have the work-life balance that I desire. But I actually started to go off on a tangent with this, but my power is that I have the best work-life choice, right? Is that I am able to make the choices that I want into what I do in my career, what I do in my life, and I'm happy about it, right? And so I love traveling. Anyone that, knows me says I have my own travel site, davidcrosstravels.com, right? And I've traveled to 63 countries so far, and before I die, I want to say I've visited 100 countries. That's the power I desire, to say that I've done it for me, right? And, for some people, it's a challenge, right? As you get older, think about everything from finances to health and things like that. And myself, right? I've died twice already in my life. I had a brain aneurysm that when I died, and I recovered from it. I'm very, very thankful for that. Ooh. And I had prostate cancer, and when they're trying to remove my prostate, my heart stopped, and it took them a while to start my heart again. I died twice. But one of the things I call out is that myself, because guess what? The moment I woke up, I'm like, when can I go back to work? Right? I'm always a glass half full person. I'm very thankful for everyone that has helped me throughout my life, right, in my career, right? And so I'm work hard, play hard. And so even when I woke up from a coma from my aneurysm, I'm wondering, like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to travel again? I didn't worry about it. It's like, man, I've had a great life so far. I'm thankful for it. So even if I can't, I'm still happy. That's the way I look at things. I'm always happy because of what I have to do. But it's about perspective. I make great choices. And as long as I think people should work at not how you have the best work-life balance, make the right work-life choices. And it's, I think you'd be much happier.
Wow. Let that sink in. 100%. Let that sink in, listeners. My God.
Goodness gracious. Well,
there's got to be something to that, David. You're the second guest that we've had on the show that actually died and was resuscitated And both you and his name was Rob said that afterwards you were fine, simply because you were doing what you wanted to do anyway. Mm-hmm. So even if that was the moment that you went, you would have had a fulfilling life. You would have felt pleased. Thank God you came back, and you can keep having that fulfilling life. But even if that was the moment you were gone, it would have been mission accomplished anyway. What a beautiful, beautiful thing.
100%. Well, David, before we wrap up, let people know where they can find you and what you have going on.
Well, certainly, I think things that are interested in what we're doing at Oracle Security, cybersecurity, right? You can find my blog for Oracle Cloud Security. I think it's quite interesting. Available on LinkedIn, of course, right? And if interested in the personal things, like I'm a travel advocate. I write a travel blog at davidcrosstravels.com. It's my personal blog. It has a little bit of humor in it as well. So I welcome people to always check it out. And really very thankful to all the companies. Certainly, Oracle of what we've been able to do for veterans, what we've been able to do for customers and cybersecurity, and also I'd like to, call out one last thing I say is, kind of a mentor I've had over many years, right? Steve Lipner, right? He's a, cybersecurity and industry professional for many, many years, right? He's somebody that's been a mentor and counsel into myself, right? I say, because similar to my experience in the military, Steve is always kind of the person with values that, has honesty, integrity, due diligence on everything, right? And whenever he's given a challenge, he takes it with vigor and enthusiasm, and that's someone that I still look up to this day. And I'm very thankful that he's able to, be that type of person for many, many others around the industry as well.
So, David, thank you again for your generous time. Thank you again for speaking with us for this long, because I know that you're a busy man, but your but as we wrap up, can you give our audience the success fundamental lesson that they need to go into their lives and achieve what they want to achieve, like the quick wrap up version?
The bottom line.
The bottom line is we're always going to have challenges. There's always going to be obstacles, right? So I say, take them with a vigor, be the detective, find out what does it take to get past it, surround yourself with others, right? Is because that's how you be successful. It's not just about you. It's about, you combining with others, and you can get through anything, in life, in the world, in business, in humanity, right? So
100%. Brian, take us home, Brian.
Well, that concludes another episode of Success Fundamentals. Thank you so much, David, for joining us, and we will see you all next week. This concludes another episode of Success Fundamentals. We hope you found today's discussion useful to your life in some way. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform, and to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.